This story is titled, "After My Parents Forced Me to Pack My Belongings and Kicked Me Out with No Warning, They Now Desperately Want Me to Return Home under the guise of needing support. But when I discovered their true sinister intentions, I was left completely speechless." Hey everyone, my name is Ethan and I'm 31 years old. For the past 8 years, I've been working as a civil engineer in Chicago after moving here from my hometown of Nashville when I was 23. Looking back, I'm proud to say that I've built a pretty decent life for myself in this city. I have a stable job designing infrastructure projects that I genuinely enjoy, a good group of friends that I hang out with regularly, and most importantly, I've achieved complete independence, something I've always valued. My relationship with my family has always been what I'd consider okay, not the super close, call everyday type, but not distant either. We check in with each other occasionally, meet up for holidays and birthdays, and generally do all the usual things that normal families do. It's been a comfortable arrangement that worked well for all of us, or so I thought. Everything changed one Tuesday morning in October when my phone rang displaying my mom's number. It struck me as strange since she rarely calls out of the blue without some prior arrangement. I answered curiously, wondering what prompted this unexpected call. The conversation started normally enough. She asked about my life, how my job was going, commented on the weather in Chicago, and other typical small talk. Then, completely out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell. "Your father and I have been thinking, maybe it's time for you to move back home." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. Who asks their 31-year-old son with an established career to suddenly move back to their hometown? But her tone was completely serious. There was no hint of humor in her voice as she explained that the family was going through a rough time and that it would mean a lot if I were there. The whole suggestion made absolutely no sense to me. My first thought was that someone must be sick. Was it my dad? A grandparent? Or perhaps they were having money problems. When I asked directly, she quickly shut down that line of questioning. "It's not about money," she insisted with an edge to her voice that I couldn't quite place. "We just need you here." That made even less sense. If it wasn't health issues and not financial trouble, then what could possibly be so urgent that I needed to uproot my entire life? I kept pressing her for specifics, but she continued to dodge my questions, responding cryptically with, "You'll understand when you're here." Before I could dig deeper, she abruptly changed the subject and ended the call, leaving me completely confused and slightly concerned. Not even an hour later, my older brother Nate called me. We were never super close growing up. We got along okay, but had different interests that took us in different directions. What struck me immediately was how he skipped all small talk and jumped straight to the point. "Mom and Dad need you here," he said bluntly. "It's selfish for you to ignore that." His aggressive tone caught me completely off guard. When I asked him what was actually happening with our parents, all he would say was, "Things aren't great, man, just come back." Then he launched into guilt-tripping me, saying I had abandoned the family when they needed me most. That accusation was ridiculous. I had just moved out like millions of normal adults do. I hadn't cut contact or done anything unusual. By this point, I was starting to get seriously annoyed at the whole situation. Later that same day, my younger sister Lily messaged me. Unlike my relationship with Nate, Lily and I have always been pretty close. But to my surprise, even she was piling on the guilt. "You know how much Mom misses you, right?" she wrote. "She cries about it sometimes. I don't know how you can be okay with that." What the actual hell was happening? This felt coordinated, like they had all decided to bombard me on the same day with the same message. Something definitely wasn't right about this situation. Over the next few days, the messages only intensified. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly started reaching out. Distant relatives acting like we were best friends, aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely knew. All of them repeated variations of the same message. "Family sticks together," and "so excited at the thought of you moving back." The whole thing was getting seriously weird, and my suspicion was growing by the hour. Perhaps the strangest part was when a family friend contacted me about a job opportunity in Nashville. He claimed to have something lined up for me if I moved back home. This was too convenient to be a coincidence. My family had never been this pushy before, and their sudden intense interest in my life felt completely unnatural. I decided it was time to investigate. I started testing people's reactions to see what might reveal the truth behind this bizarre campaign. I called Lily and casually mentioned that my lease wasn't up for another 6 months, just to see how she would respond. Her reaction was telling. She hesitated awkwardly before saying, "Oh, that's, not great timing." When I asked why the timing mattered so much, she suddenly had to go, ending our call abruptly. This was suspicious as hell. Something major was definitely happening and they were all hiding it from me. The next morning, Mom called again. I decided to test her reaction too. I told her that I wouldn't be able to move back until next year, thinking she'd just accept it and let it go if this was truly just a casual invitation to come home. Her response shocked me. "So you just don't care about us?" she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp and accusatory. "After everything we've done for you?" I was completely thrown off by this response. It confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. This wasn't a casual invitation anymore. This was straight-up manipulation. I was starting to get genuinely worried about what might be going on. Later that same day, I heard loud knocking at my apartment door. When I opened it, I was stunned to find my father standing there. There had been no warning, no heads up. He had just driven 3 hours from Nashville to Chicago like it was completely normal behavior. He gave me this long, intense stare before saying, "We need to talk." While he wasn't exactly angry, he definitely wasn't calm either. Throughout our conversation, he kept saying I was being difficult and overthinking everything. I asked him point blank what was really going on, hoping for a straight answer. He sighed dramatically before responding, "We just need the family together right now, that's all." That wasn't a real answer. It told me nothing about why they needed me back so urgently. I firmly told him I wasn't moving back, at least not anytime soon. He just shook his head in disappointment and left without another word, leaving me even more confused and concerned. After that unexpected visit, the pressure from my family intensified dramatically. Mom started calling multiple times every day. Nate kept sending passive-aggressive texts. Even Lily, who usually stays out of family drama, was suddenly trying hard to convince me to move back. It felt like they were all closing in on me, and I was starting to feel overwhelmed by their relentless campaign. Then something really strange happened that made me even more suspicious. An old friend from high school, Greg, messaged me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years, but he had apparently seen a vague post I had made about my family acting weird. His message was short but deeply disturbing. "Whatever you do, don't move back, trust me." That was it. No explanation, no context, just that cryptic warning. I immediately replied asking what he meant, but he left me on read. Now I wasn't just suspicious. I was legitimately worried about what might be waiting for me back in Nashville. The messages didn't stop coming. Every morning there was something new. Missed calls from Mom, creepy voicemails where she was either crying or speaking in this unnaturally soft voice that sent chills down my spine. Nate wasn't as dramatic in his approach, but his texts were relentless. Short, passive-aggressive jabs like, "Guess family doesn't mean much to you anymore," and "Hope you don't regret this later." Each message only reinforced my suspicion that something was seriously wrong. Even more disturbing was how distant relatives were joining in on this campaign. People who had barely acknowledged my existence before were suddenly sending guilt-laden messages about how family sticks together and how things would be so much easier if I just came home. This wasn't just weird anymore. It was becoming genuinely scary. The coordinated effort felt almost cult-like in its intensity. Then came a breakthrough. My cousin Thomas, someone I was never particularly close with, messaged me out of the blue. At first, his message followed the same guilt trip formula: how my parents missed me, how moving back would be good for everyone. But then he carelessly let something slip that made me freeze. "Since they already made arrangements, it's not like it'll be hard for you," he wrote. That single sentence stopped me cold. What arrangements? What the hell was he talking about? I immediately asked him directly what he meant, and his backpedaling was immediate and obvious. He claimed he was just assuming things, but it was too late. He had confirmed my growing suspicion. My family wasn't just hoping I'd move back. They had already planned for it without telling me. They were operating under the assumption that my return was inevitable, not optional. I called my parents immediately, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and anxiety. Dad picked up, sounding calm but firm. I asked him directly about these arrangements Thomas had mentioned. To my surprise, he didn't even try to deny it. He just brushed it off, saying they had simply prepared for the possibility of my return. When I pressed for specific details, he pivoted back to the same vague insistence that things will be better if I came home. No specifics, no explanation, just the same cryptic pressure. The situation was getting creepier by the day. I decided it was time to start my own investigation. On a hunch, I began checking property records, digging through public databases to see if I could find any clues. After some searching, I discovered something strange. My parents had recently refinanced their mortgage. That alone wasn't proof of anything sinister, but considering how desperate they were to get me home, it felt suspiciously timed. My suspicions deepened during a later conversation with Lily. We were talking about something completely unrelated when she casually mentioned that our parents had recently fixed up my old bedroom. "Just in case," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Just in case of what? I hadn't lived there in 8 years. They had zero reason to suddenly renovate my childhood bedroom unless they were planning for me to move back, and soon. That same night, I reached out to Mrs. Jensen, an old neighbor from Nashville, hoping she might have some insight into what was happening with my family. I kept the conversation casual at first, just catching up on neighborhood gossip. But when I mentioned my parents, I noticed an immediate change in her tone, a weird hesitation that raised red flags. "Something weird has been going on over there lately," she said. Her voice lowered as if she was afraid of being overheard. When I tried to ask what she meant, she immediately backtracked, saying she doesn't want to get involved. Her reluctance to elaborate only confirmed that something was definitely wrong in Nashville. Then Nate tried a new tactic. Instead of his usual guilt tripping, he sent a dramatic message about Mom's health, claiming she had been getting worse and that my absence was making things harder. This might have worked if I wasn't already suspicious of everything they were telling me. Instead of panicking, I checked Mom's Facebook page. That same day, literally hours before Nate's message, she had posted about a shopping trip, even including a picture of herself laughing and carrying shopping bags. She looked perfectly healthy and happy. Nate was straight up lying to me, which only made me more determined to uncover the truth. Things got even stranger when Mr. Wilson, a family friend I hadn't talked to in years, called me out of the blue. The conversation started polite enough, but quickly turned oddly insistent, with him bringing up how everyone would feel better if I moved back and how I could help fix things. When I asked directly what needed fixing, he dodged the question, only saying it was about making things easier for everyone. They weren't even trying to hide the manipulation anymore. It was becoming increasingly transparent and desperate. I decided to make a counteroffer, thinking it might reveal more about their true motives. I told my family that while I wouldn't move back, I would visit for a weekend to see them. This should have been good news, right? A reasonable compromise that would allow me to check on them without uprooting my entire life. Their reaction was bizarre and telling. Instead of being pleased with my offer to visit, they seemed hesitant, almost uneasy, like I'd somehow messed up their carefully laid plans. Dad barely responded to my message. Mom suddenly acted like she didn't care if I visited or not, which was completely inconsistent with her tearful voicemails from just days earlier. Nate went silent for hours before finally sending a vague text. That's not really what we meant. The whole exchange left me even more confused and suspicious. Finally, Lily cracked. Late that night, she sent me a cryptic message that confirmed something was seriously wrong. It's not about what they told you, it's about what they didn't. That was enough for me. I was done waiting for them to tell me the truth. It was time to find it myself. I started searching public records, looking for anything connected to my parents that might explain their bizarre behavior. Finally, I found something. A lawsuit they were involved in, some kind of legal battle. I couldn't access the full details yet, but it was serious enough to be filed in court. This felt like progress, but it was just the beginning. That's when it hit me that I should check my own financial records, something I should have done much earlier. What I discovered made my blood run cold. There it was, staring back at me from my credit report. A massive loan taken out in my name that I had never signed for or agreed to. I never authorized it, never saw the paperwork, yet somehow my name was on the documents. The truth crashed down on me like a ton of bricks. That's why they wanted me back. They had taken out a loan using my identity. They needed to keep me close before I found out, before I could do anything about their fraud. The realization made me physically ill. I didn't immediately tell them what I'd discovered. Instead, I hired a lawyer quietly. If they had stolen from me once, what else were they planning? What would have happened if I had actually moved back home? These thoughts were making me sick to my stomach, but I needed to proceed carefully. My lawyer didn't take long to confirm my worst suspicions. The loan in my name was completely fraudulent. The signatures were forged, and the paperwork was full of inconsistencies. But that was just the beginning. Digging deeper, he found something even worse. My parents had been using my social security number for years. They had opened multiple credit lines under my name, taking out small amounts here and there, carefully avoiding triggering any major red flags that would have alerted me sooner. This had been going on for so long that by the time I noticed, they'd already racked up significant debt in my name. I felt absolutely betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me. My lawyer explained my options. I could file a police report immediately and start the process of clearing my name, but that meant officially turning against my family. If I waited too long, though, they could do even more damage. I told my lawyer I needed time to think, but deep down, I already knew what I needed to do. Right on cue, Dad tried a new tactic. He suddenly claimed he was having heart problems, another obvious manipulation attempt, especially since he had been perfectly fine during his surprise visit to my apartment just days ago. He sent dramatic messages about his declining health, claiming the stress of the family situation was literally killing him. He made sure to mention how much it would mean to have me home and how everything would be better if I just came back. I wasn't falling for this bullshit anymore. Instead of reacting emotionally, I asked my cousin Jake to check on Dad. A simple visit, nothing dramatic. Jake's response came back quickly. Dad was perfectly fine. No heart issues, no emergency. Just another fucking lie designed to manipulate me into returning home. I started gathering every piece of evidence, every text, every voicemail, every suspicious message. I documented everything in case I needed legal protection, which was looking increasingly likely. Then I decided to push a little to see how they would react. I called my parents, keeping the conversation light. I casually mentioned looking into my financial records, and their reaction was immediate and telling. Mom's tone shifted from concern to defensive in seconds. She told me to let the past stay in the past and said some things don't need to be dug up. She kept talking over me, trying desperately to change the subject. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. They were guilty and they knew it. Nate made the next mistake. Unlike our parents, he didn't realize how much I'd already figured out. In a moment of frustration, he let something slip. He told me they were just trying to fix things and that they had no choice. He backpedaled immediately, but the damage was done. He had just admitted they knew exactly what they were doing when they stole my identity. I relayed everything to my lawyer, who strongly advised filing a police report as soon as possible, before more damage could be done. He also suggested contacting my bank directly. When I did, I got the final confirmation that shattered any lingering doubts. This wasn't a one-time thing or a recent act of desperation. Fraudulent loans had been taken out over several years. Some had been paid off before they could be noticed, while others had ballooned into major debt. This wasn't an accident or mistake. This was a long-term, calculated scheme orchestrated by my own family. Everything made sense now. The sudden warmth from relatives who barely acknowledged my existence, the relentless guilt-tripping, the mysterious job offer, the desperate attempts to get me home, all of it was a ploy. They had been stealing from me for years, but now that I had started looking into my finances, they were desperate to get me back under their control before I could expose their full scheme. Instead of confronting them directly, which might give them time to cover their tracks, I decided to set a trap. I told them I was considering moving back, pretending to weigh my options while observing their reactions. Then I dropped the bait. I told them I could move in 3 months. 5 minutes later, literally 5 minutes, Dad called. The same man who was supposedly too sick to function was suddenly full of energy, insisting I needed to come next week. Not next month, not in a few weeks, next fucking week. That's all the confirmation I needed. They weren't worried about family. They were worried about time running out on their scheme. I stopped answering their calls and finalized everything with my lawyer. The legal process had officially begun. I had to face the harsh truth that, to them, I was never a son, never family. I was just a financial asset, and they would stop at nothing to keep control over me and my finances. Early one morning, I was startled by loud, insistent knocking at my door. There had been no warning, no heads up, just aggressive pounding that yanked me from sleep. I checked the peephole and immediately tensed up. My parents were standing outside my apartment. They had driven 3 hours unannounced, just to talk. I opened the door but deliberately didn't invite them in, stepping outside and shutting the door behind me to make it clear they weren't welcome inside my home. Dad stood stiffly, scanning my face like he was trying to read my thoughts. Mom was behind him, looking frantic, her eyes red and hands wringing together in what I now recognized as performative distress. Dad spoke first, his tone carefully measured. He started off calm, saying they just wanted to clear up any misunderstandings. I didn't say anything, just let him talk. It didn't take long before he started poking around, trying to gauge how much I knew. He asked vague questions about my job, my plans, whether I'd thought more about moving back. The way he was watching me made it clear. This wasn't casual conversation. It was an interrogation disguised as parental concern. Mom suddenly cut in, her voice shaking with what I now recognized as calculated emotion. She started talking about how they always did everything for the family and how sometimes you have to make hard choices to keep things together. She never actually admitted to the fraud, but she wasn't exactly denying it either. The way she was speaking, it was like she thought I already knew everything and was trying to justify their actions instead of hiding them. I noticed Nate and Lily were standing a few feet behind my parents. Nate looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight and avoiding eye contact. Lily wouldn't even lift her head to look at me. That was all the confirmation I needed. They knew. They had known this entire time what our parents had been doing with my identity. I decided to test them further. I pretended to be considering moving back, keeping my voice neutral as I mentioned I'd been thinking about it. The shift in their demeanor was instant and revealing. Dad's stiff posture relaxed visibly. Mom let out this breath like she'd been holding it for hours. Then, almost immediately, the pressure started again. Dad insisted I move within the week. Mom started talking about how they'd set things up for me already. When I asked what that meant, she brushed it off, saying, "Everything is taken care of," which only heightened my suspicion. Then came the part that really set off alarm bells. Mom, still sniffling dramatically, mentioned I needed to sign a few documents. "Just basic paperwork to make things easier," she said, as if asking her adult son to sign unspecified paperwork was the most normal thing in the world. I asked to see these documents, and her hesitation was telling. Dad shot her a quick warning look before stepping in to claim they left them at home. How fucking convenient. I told them I couldn't move that quickly. I had work commitments and loose ends to tie up in Chicago. Dad's tone shifted again, his patience wearing thin. He started talking about how refusing to come home was making things more difficult, and how family is supposed to trust each other. He didn't raise his voice, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, like he was issuing a warning rather than expressing concern. I pushed back with another test. I told them I was planning to quit my job soon and would visit home to figure things out. It was a complete lie, but I needed to see how they would react. It worked perfectly. Mom let out this shaky laugh, nodding rapidly like everything was finally falling into place. Dad looked satisfied, his shoulders relaxing. They completely bought my act, convinced their plan was back on track. Once they finally left, I called my lawyer immediately. He warned me that under no circumstances should I sign anything they gave me. He was almost certain they were trying to tie me into something legally, probably more financial fraud that would make me complicit in their scheme. Things got even worse that night. I decided to check my credit score, which had been good the last time I looked. To my horror, it had dropped significantly. Confused and increasingly anxious, I went through my credit report line by line. What I found left me speechless. Someone had maxed out multiple credit cards under my name, cards I didn't even know existed. They were still actively using me financially, even as they were standing in my apartment earlier that day, pretending to be concerned parents who just wanted their son to come home. That was the breaking point. There was no saving this relationship, no second chances to consider. They weren't desperate parents who had made a one-time mistake in a moment of financial crisis. They were liars and thieves who had been systematically exploiting me for years. The only thing they truly cared about was what they could take from me. I called my lawyer again, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. We were done waiting. It was time to take definitive legal action. 2 days of strange silence followed. After weeks of constant calls, messages, and relentless guilt-tripping, my family suddenly went quiet. No missed calls from Mom, no passive-aggressive texts from Nate, nothing. The abrupt change in tactics felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were planning something. My instincts proved correct when things started happening with my finances again. My bank accounts began acting strange, small delays in transactions, failed login attempts, and then a freeze on one of my credit cards. When I called the bank to investigate, they informed me that someone had tried to access my account multiple times, triggering their security measures. I called my lawyer immediately to update him on this new development. He hit me with something even worse than I had anticipated. My parents had actually attempted to file paperwork to gain financial control over me, citing concerns about my ability to manage money. They had tried to do this without any medical proof or my consent. Their request was quickly denied by the court, but the audacity of what they'd attempted left me reeling. They weren't just trying to keep stealing from me. They were trying to take full legal control of everything I owned. The paperwork had been denied this time, but my lawyer warned me this was likely only the beginning. If they were willing to go this far already, they wouldn't stop now. Then the smear campaign started. Lily, who had been mostly quiet throughout this ordeal, suddenly became very active on social media. She began posting vague messages about family betrayal and how some people turn their backs on those who raised them. She never mentioned me directly, but I knew exactly who these posts were aimed at. Other relatives quickly joined in, liking and commenting on these posts, making it clear they had been fed whatever story my parents were spinning to maintain their image as the victims in this situation. The campaign didn't stop with social media. My old employer reached out to me, sounding confused. Apparently, my parents had contacted them, asking if they would rehire me. They were acting as if I was suddenly jobless and in desperate need of help. When my former boss asked if everything was okay, I assured him I had no idea what they were talking about. I was employed and financially stable, despite my family's best efforts to change that. Then came a voicemail that chilled me to the bone. It was Mom's voice, thick with fake concern, pleading for me to call her back. She claimed they were worried about my well-being and just wanted to help. I had heard this tone before, but now I understood what it really meant. She wasn't worried about me as a person. She was worried about losing control over me and my finances. What happened next caught me completely off guard. 2 police officers showed up at my apartment one evening. They had received a welfare check request from my parents, who had claimed I had been acting erratic and might be a danger to myself. I managed to stay calm, remembering that my lawyer had warned this might happen. I had documentation prepared for exactly this scenario. I explained everything to the officers, handing over legal records proving what was going on with my identity theft and giving them my lawyer's contact information. They asked standard questions to assess my mental state, and seeing that everything was fine, they left without further issue. It could have gone much worse if I hadn't been prepared. After this incident, my lawyer took immediate action. He began freezing any accounts my parents had access to and securing all my financial records. The process wasn't instant, but with every step, I was cutting off their reach into my finances. Then we moved to the next phase, officially filing fraud charges against them. The moment that paperwork went through, the floodgates opened. Mom started calling over and over, leaving voicemails that oscillated wildly between crying, pleading, and trying to convince me to just talk before things get worse. Dad, always more direct, sent a single final message that was short, cold, and to the point. "You don't know what you're doing." I blocked them both immediately, as well as Nate, who had been complicit in their scheme. The only person I didn't block yet was Lily. While she hadn't been directly involved in the fraud as far as I knew, she had known about it and stayed silent. I wasn't sure where she stood in all this, but for now, I kept that line of communication open. Even after blocking their numbers, they started reaching out through different channels, different phone numbers, unknown caller IDs, fake social media accounts. Throughout all of this, one thought kept circling in my mind. If they were willing to sabotage my finances so thoroughly, what else would they do to stop me from exposing them? The silence from my family didn't last long. A few days after I cut off my parents and Nate, Lily finally reached out. Her message was short. She wanted to talk in person. Despite my hesitation, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop far from my apartment, not wanting to risk her sharing my address with our parents. When I arrived, Lily looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. The moment we sat down, she broke down and blurted out the whole truth. Our parents' business had been failing for years, much worse than anyone had let on. They had initially taken loans under my name to keep it afloat, telling themselves it was just a temporary measure. What started as small amounts, just enough to cover shortfalls, gradually increased as their financial situation deteriorated. My name had become their safety net, a way to borrow money without risking their own credit or putting up their own assets as collateral. She hesitated before adding something that hit me like a punch to the gut. Nate hadn't just known about the fraud. He had actively helped forge documents. This explained everything: the coordinated pressure to move back, the sudden warmth and concern, the urgency. One of the fraudulent loans was under investigation, and they needed me back home so they could convince the bank that I had willingly taken it out. If I had signed anything when they asked during their visit to my apartment, it would have locked me into the debt permanently, making me legally responsible for paying it back. Lily herself was terrified. She wanted out but didn't know how. Our parents still controlled everything in her life: her housing, her finances, even her social circle. She was scared of what they would do if she tried to leave or stand against them. I told my lawyer everything Lily had revealed. His response was immediate and firm. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed to file the lawsuit now. The longer I waited, the more damage they could potentially do. So I took the final step. The lawsuit was officially filed, effectively blocking them from accessing any more of my finances or taking out additional loans in my name. That's when things truly exploded. Dad left a voicemail, furious and screaming about how I was ruining everything. Mom took to social media, posting dramatic messages about betrayal and how some people forget where they come from. Extended family members started sending messages, accusing me of turning on my own parents, completely unaware of the years of financial abuse I had endured. Then the story my parents were spreading began to change. They started telling everyone that I was the one who had stolen money, that I had secretly taken out loans and was now blaming them to cover up my own financial misdeeds. Some relatives believed them without question. Others kept their distance from the conflict, unwilling to take sides. In the midst of this chaos, I received an unexpected call from my distant Aunt Meredith. She hadn't been involved in any of the drama until now, but had seen Mom's social media posts and decided to reach out. What she told me confirmed that this pattern of behavior wasn't new. My parents had been caught up in shady financial dealings years before. They had borrowed a significant sum from another family member and never paid it back. There had been rumors circulating within the extended family for years, but nothing had ever been publicly addressed until now. And then, just as suddenly as he had been pushing me to return home, Nate vanished. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, he had kept up the pressure campaign alongside our parents, but once the lawsuit was filed, he stopped contacting me completely. I suspected he was either trying to avoid legal consequences or was working on his own defense strategy. This raised a new concern. Was he just trying to avoid punishment, or was he planning something else? Meanwhile, Lily made a decision that showed remarkable courage. She wanted out completely. She asked if she could stay with me while she figured out her next steps, no longer trusting our parents after seeing the extent of their manipulation. I agreed immediately, not wanting to leave her stuck in that toxic environment. Then came a final warning that sent chills down my spine. An anonymous voicemail arrived on my phone. No name, no identifying details, just a low voice saying, "Watch your back. They're not done yet." After all the fraud, manipulation, and false reports, everything had failed to bring me back under their control. But the message suggested they might try something else, something more desperate and dangerous. The first anonymous message came late at night, a single text reading, "Drop the case while you still can." I ignored it, assuming it was just another intimidation tactic. The second one arrived the next morning. "You're making a mistake." Then the call started. No caller ID, just silent intimidation. The first time I let it go to voicemail, there was nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. The second time I picked up, a low voice said, "Walk away or you'll regret it," before the line went dead. I reported everything to my lawyer, who advised me to document each incident meticulously. We both strongly suspected who was behind these threats, but without concrete proof, there wasn't much we could do legally. He encouraged me to stay vigilant and keep track of any further intimidation attempts. Then something happened that crossed the line from harassment to potential danger. One morning, I went outside to drive to work and found my car sitting noticeably lower than usual. All four tires had been slashed. At first, I thought it was just random vandalism until I had the car towed to a mechanic. After checking under the hood, he gave me a grim look that made my blood run cold. "Your brake lines were cut," he said quietly, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. The implication was clear. Whoever did this wasn't just trying to intimidate me or inconvenience me. They wanted to cause real harm. I filed a police report immediately. The officer took my statement carefully, asking detailed questions about the damage to my car and whether I had any suspicions about who might have done it. But without security cameras or witnesses, there wasn't much concrete action they could take. The officer advised me to be extremely careful, suggesting I install security cameras around my apartment as soon as possible. That became my immediate priority. I installed cameras outside my door and in my parking space and changed all my locks that same day. My lawyer warned me to be on high alert, especially after we received confirmation that someone had attempted to access my bank accounts again, even after all the legal steps we'd taken to prevent it. Even after everything that had happened, my family was still trying to steal from me, which only reinforced how desperate they must be. Then, the confrontation I'd been dreading happened. Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I hadn't spoken to him since I blocked his number, but there he was, standing outside my door, pounding his fist against it with increasing force. I didn't answer at first, but the knocking turned into aggressive pounding that threatened to disturb my neighbors. I finally opened the door just enough to step outside, making sure he couldn't push past me into my apartment. His face was red with barely contained rage as he demanded I fix this before it's too late. He kept saying I was making things worse for everyone and that I was being dramatic, as if filing charges for identity theft and fraud was an overreaction. He insisted that family handles things privately, which I now understood was code for let us keep stealing from you without consequences. Then he made a crucial mistake. In the middle of his angry rant, he let something slip that confirmed what Lily had told me. He said something about how Nate only did what was necessary to keep things running. I maintained a neutral expression, not wanting him to realize what he just admitted, but I caught it immediately. He had just confirmed that Nate was handling the forged documents and was a willing participant in the fraud. After he finally left, I told Lily about the slip-up. She broke down completely and confirmed it. Nate had indeed been forging paperwork for years. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't a desperate act during a family crisis, but a calculated long-term scheme that he had actively participated in. Messages from extended family started pouring in after that. They called me selfish, ungrateful, cruel, claiming I was destroying the family over some money, as if stealing my identity and ruining my credit were minor offenses that should be overlooked in the name of family loyalty. That same night, my parents invited me to a family dinner, saying they wanted to talk things through in person. My lawyer immediately advised against going, warning me that it was too risky. If they got me alone, they could try to manipulate me into signing something that would make me legally liable for their debts, or worse, considering what had happened to my car. I declined their invitation immediately. Then a childhood friend from Nashville called me. Oliver had heard about the situation through mutual friends and felt compelled to warn me. "Your family is spreading some crazy stories about you," he said, his voice concerned. "They're making you out to be some greedy villain who abandoned them in their time of need. Be careful. They're trying to turn everyone against you." The next morning, my lawyer told me we had enough grounds to discuss filing a restraining order against my parents and Nate. They weren't just emotionally manipulating me anymore. They had escalated to sabotaging my car, continued attempts to access my finances despite legal blocks, and sending anonymous threats. Their behavior had crossed from unethical to potentially dangerous. That night at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was from Mom, her voice broken and desperate, shaking with what sounded like genuine sobs. "Please, please just drop this," she begged. "We only did what we had to do. We had no other choice. Please don't do this to us." Despite the emotional delivery, I couldn't help but notice she still wasn't apologizing for what they'd done, only for getting caught and facing consequences. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my lawyer had a new update. Formal fraud charges were imminent, and with everything my family had already done to try to silence or intimidate me, one thought kept circling in my mind. If they were willing to sabotage my car in a way that could have caused a serious accident, what else would they do to stop me from pursuing justice? The fraud case was now officially public. The lawsuit had been filed, and a court date was set. There was no going back, no way for my parents to sweep this under the rug or try to handle it within the family, as they'd insisted was the proper way. Their criminal behavior would be exposed in a public court of law. That's when everything started falling apart for them. A source who still lived in Nashville and had connections to my parents' business circle reached out to me privately. They told me my parents' business was in far worse shape than they had let on to anyone. The debts they'd racked up were completely unmanageable at this point. They had been using me as their last-ditch effort to save themselves financially, and now that I had cut them off, their financial collapse was inevitable. Nate, who had been defensive and accusatory before, completely stopped reaching out. No texts, no calls, nothing but radio silence. My lawyer suspected he was negotiating a deal for himself, trying to throw my parents under the bus to protect himself legally. His sudden disappearance from the conflict only reinforced this theory. Then things took another unexpected turn. The police contacted me about a harassment complaint filed against me by my own father. According to his claim, I had been stalking and threatening my family, making their lives unsafe. It was an outright lie. I hadn't seen them in person since Dad showed up at my apartment, and I certainly hadn't been threatening anyone. My lawyer acted quickly, countering the false accusation with a defamation lawsuit against Dad. If they wanted to play dirty, we were fully prepared to respond in kind through proper legal channels. That's when my extended family started backing away from the situation. Some aunts and uncles who had originally sided with my parents began distancing themselves after learning about the fraud charges. Maybe they had believed my parents' version of events at first, but now that everything was going public through official legal channels, they wanted nothing to do with the whole mess. The family unity they had preached so passionately just weeks ago suddenly evaporated when faced with actual criminal charges. Then I received a cryptic message from Lily that sent a chill down my spine. "I cannot take this anymore. I am leaving." She refused to disclose where she was going, no matter how much I pressed for details. I didn't push too hard. If she was trying to escape our parents' toxic influence, I wasn't going to do anything that might put her at risk. I just hoped she was going somewhere safe. My lawyer delivered the final damning evidence a few days later. He had hired a private investigator just to make sure my parents weren't trying anything new that might jeopardize my safety or finances. What they found was worse than I had expected. Even after the fraud case had been filed, when most reasonable people would have stopped digging the hole deeper, my parents had attempted to use stolen personal information to apply for another credit line in my name. However, since I had already alerted my bank and placed fraud alerts on my accounts, their attempt was flagged and blocked before any damage could be done. Their desperation was reaching new heights. That evidence was enough to get a restraining order approved. My parents and Nate were now legally prohibited from contacting me, coming near me, or interfering in my life in any way. The court recognized the escalating pattern of harassment and potential danger, taking action to provide me with legal protection. That's when Mom had her public meltdown. She went online posting dramatic social media messages about how a mother's love was being punished, about how certain children forget the sacrifices their parents make, and about how money had poisoned family values. She never once acknowledged the fraud or identity theft. In her narrative, I was the villain who had betrayed the sacred bonds of family for no reason. Then the last message came. Dad left one final voicemail, his voice filled with barely contained rage. "You will regret this, mark my words." I didn't hesitate. I blocked every single family member involved in the scheme. No more warnings, no more chances, no more openings for manipulation or threats. My lawyer then confirmed what I had suspected. Nate was indeed trying to negotiate a plea deal, shifting all the blame onto our parents to minimize his own legal exposure. Now, with overwhelming evidence mounting against all of them, my lawyer assured me of one thing. My parents were about to face severe legal and financial consequences. With the court date approaching, I realized this was only the beginning of the final chapter in this nightmare. After months of legal proceedings, depositions, and mountains of paperwork, the court date finally arrived. My parents and Nate walked into the courtroom looking completely drained, nothing like the confident manipulators who had shown up at my apartment months ago. Their confidence was gone. No fake smiles, no attempts to guilt me with sad looks. They already knew they had lost. The evidence against them was overwhelming and irrefutable. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically. Bank statements, forged documents, fraudulent loans, the failed attempt to gain financial control over me. Every piece of proof laid out, making it impossible to deny what they had done. My lawyer had done his job exceptionally well, presenting a clear timeline of their years of financial abuse. Dad was the first to speak in his defense, trying desperately to deflect blame. He insisted he did not know what was happening and pointed fingers at Nate, claiming he was the one who handled the financial matters. But his defense fell apart immediately. There were signed documents with Dad's handwriting, emails confirming his direct involvement, clear proof that he had been orchestrating this scheme from the start. His attempt to throw Nate under the bus failed spectacularly. Then Nate's deal was confirmed. As expected, he had agreed to testify against our parents in exchange for a lesser sentence. He claimed they had pressured him into forging the documents, making it seem like he had no choice but to participate. But that defense crumbled quickly when faced with evidence. His emails, signatures, and financial activities showed he wasn't a reluctant participant. He was a willing accomplice who had benefited from the fraud. When the sentencing was announced, the judge made it abundantly clear that this was not a misunderstanding or a simple financial mistake. It was deliberate, calculated fraud committed over years against a family member. My parents were ordered to repay all the fraudulent loans on top of heavy fines that would likely finish off whatever remained of their finances. Nate received probation with significant financial penalties, plus a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. Then Lily did something that surprised me. She had refused to speak to our parents for weeks, but at the last moment, she submitted a formal statement to the court about the years of manipulation and financial abuse they had put us through. She detailed how they had always controlled us, how they viewed us as tools to be used rather than children to be loved and protected. Her statement painted a picture of a family dynamic built on control and exploitation rather than love and support. Mom finally broke down in court, sobbing dramatically and claiming she was just a helpless mother who only wanted to protect her family. She begged for mercy, for a lighter punishment, playing the role of the distraught parent one last time. But the judge wasn't moved by her performance. "You did not act as a helpless mother," he said firmly. "You acted with intent to defraud your own child. Actions have consequences." There was no sympathy, no reduced penalties. The full weight of their actions fell squarely on their shoulders, exactly where it belonged. Outside of court, the fallout was brutal and swift. Word spread quickly throughout Nashville about what my parents had done. Their neighbors, their friends, even the few extended relatives who had stubbornly stood by them. Everyone now knew the truth. Their business had already been failing, and with their reputation completely destroyed, there was no way they could recover. The financial house of cards they had built using my identity had finally collapsed around them. Then came the last desperate plea. I received an email from a new account with no name, but I recognized the writing style immediately. It was Mom. She begged for money, claiming they had nothing left after the court's judgment. She pleaded for me to not abandon them in their time of need, apparently forgetting or ignoring the fact that they were in this position precisely because they had betrayed and exploited me for years. I deleted the email without responding, feeling nothing but a cold detachment. Meanwhile, Nate's life was falling apart as well. His employer found out about the fraud case, and he lost his job almost immediately. With a criminal record and significant debts to pay as part of his sentencing, his future prospects were bleak. His life was ruined entirely by his own doing, by the choices he had made to participate in stealing from his own brother. Lily finally got out completely. She moved to a new city far away from Nashville, cutting off all contact with our parents. For the first time in her life, she was free from their manipulative influence. She was starting fresh, building a life on her own terms without the toxic family dynamics that had defined our childhood. And so was I. I relocated to a different part of Chicago, changed my number, and completely erased my parents and Nate from my life. There was no more fear of what they might try next, no more worrying about stolen finances, manipulation, or threats. I don't forgive them for what they did, and I never will. The betrayal cuts too deep for that. But for the first time in months, I felt free. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. They had wanted me back home for support. But what they truly wanted was control. Control over me, control over my finances, control over my future. Now they had lost everything, and I had finally won back my life and my independence. Looking back on everything that happened, I still sometimes struggle to comprehend how my own family could have done this to me. These were the people who were supposed to protect me, support me, and celebrate my independence. Instead, they viewed that independence as an obstacle to their plans to exploit me financially. They saw me not as a son or a brother, but as a resource to be used until there was nothing left. The legal process was long and painful but necessary. I've spent months rebuilding my credit score and financial reputation, working closely with banks and credit agencies to remove the fraudulent accounts and loans from my record. It's been exhausting, but worth it to reclaim my financial identity. Occasionally, I hear snippets of information about my parents through distant relatives who still keep in touch. Their business finally closed. They had to sell their house to pay back the debts, and they've become essentially pariahs in the community where they once were respected. Nate apparently moved to another state, trying to start over where his reputation hasn't preceded him. I feel nothing when I hear these updates. No satisfaction, no pity, just emotional distance. Lily and I stay in touch regularly. She's doing well in her new city, has found a good job, and is slowly building a support network of genuine friends. We talk about a lot of things, but rarely about our parents. Some wounds are still too fresh. As for me, I've strengthened the relationships that truly matter. Friends who stood by me during this nightmare. Colleagues who never judged me for the situation I was dragged into. I've learned painful lessons about trust and family, but also about my own resilience. My life is mine again, free from their manipulation and control. They had wanted me back for what they claimed was family support, but all they truly wanted was to maintain control over me and continue exploiting me financially. Now, they've lost everything, and I've finally reclaimed my life, my finances, and my future. The price was high. The family I thought I had is gone forever, but the freedom I've gained in return is invaluable. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that family isn't defined by blood or shared last names. It's defined by respect, trust, and genuine care for each other's well-being. By that definition, those people were never really my family at all.